Hi everyone, it's Elaine Hamilton from the Reiki Center. And in this video, we're going to talk about awakening and the different levels, two particular different levels of awakening. Obviously, there's lots that people experience over their lifetime, but sometimes it can get quite confusing because people use awakening in a very general term to describe their own experience of waking up to something. And then often it can be very confusing as to all the different tools that we find available. And these tools are specifically designed for different levels. So at the most basic level of awakening, if you imagine that for many of us, we have been brought up in an environment whereby we've been indoctrinated. So what I mean by that is a very natural process of growing up. We've been told the rules and we've unquestionably taken on these rules and made them at part of our being, part of our experience of life. So the most typical rule is there's a certain way to behave in society, and we're all expected to go to school, and we're all expected to then, when we graduate, try and get as high up as possible, because that means that we get as good a job as possible. And then when we get the job, blah, 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 make the most money possible, and then get married and have kids and make the best use of that. And there's like a kind of pathway through life that we are taught very, very young as something we should aspire to. And then we have all the other indoctrinations we have in terms of how we should feel about certain things, how we should look, how we should dress, it just goes on and on and on and on. Now, for some of us, we're lucky. For some of us, that pathway actually suits us. And you'll see lots of people on the planet getting along with their daily lives, perfectly happy and content. And they do the thing that they're trained to do, and they don't have any complaints and they don't have any feelings of discontent. So for these people, awakening isn't necessary because they're not actually out of sync. They're in sync anyway. There's nothing to wake up from because they're happy. Now, for many of us and most of us, when we're drawn to Reiki or healing modalities, or looking online for this kind of thing, or you think, "Ooh, what's awakening?" That's not applying to you. So something is going on in your life where you're like, this does not fit. So at the most basic level of awakening, it's awakening into the realization that we are a unique living being, living a unique life flow, a life journey, and it is unique to us. And therefore, what works for other people doesn't necessarily work for us. And what path our parents want us to go on, or society expects us to go on, is not necessarily the path for us. Now, this might seem a really obvious thing, but when you really wake up to this, it is huge. And for many people, they experience this level of awakening when everything around them is falling apart. So there's normally an immense amount of suffering and pressure that is going on around, because if you didn't have that level of suffering, then you wouldn't be waking up to anything. There'd be nothing to wake up to. So in essence, there is a level of suffering that comes into play, like pressure, whereby you just feel trapped. And a lot of people describe it as they feel trapped. They feel like they're in a prison. They feel totally wrong. They feel out of place. They don't feel like they belong. And these kinds of descriptions is because you're trying to follow a path that isn't yours. So at this level of awakening, it's a really powerful kind of, you just literally open your eyes and you're like, oh my God, I'm trying to walk somebody else's path. So from that viewpoint, it's a very powerful waking up. And you can wake up at many different levels. You can have many different levels of awakening here. You can wake up to your own life and kind of like the lie it is in a way, like, oh my God, I'm living my parents' dream, or I'm living a dream that I thought I wanted, but I actually don't want. So it's a real inner discovery as to you as a unique expression of life. And at this level of awakening, you'll start to be attracted to many different tools. You might be attracted to certain intuitive aspects. You might be looking at like angels, angel cards, intuitive, expressing your intuitive abilities. You might be getting healing and help. You might be looking at law of attraction and how I can bring more of that into my life. The key thing here at this level of awakening is that you are seeing with more and more clarity that you have permission to live your own life and to live it the way you want to live it, not the way everyone else thinks that you should be living it. Now, at this level of awakening, there is a lot of there's a lot of grief. There's a lot of loss. There'll be friends that you have to leave behind. There might be jobs. There might be partners. There's a lot of shedding. There's a lot of shedding. And so it can come with a lot of struggle. And for many people at this stage, they're looking for communities, people that are going through the same thing. You might be drawn to kind of meet with people who have also been going through a similar thing. You'll be online looking for people to follow that are basically helping you to become more and more self-empowered. So in this segment, if you like, of growth, your main job is to come into a really deep understanding that you are living a very unique experience. Now, unique is not the same as special. There's nothing special about it. It's just unique. It's different, and it's totally geared to you. So it's you, how you feel about life, how you're flowing through life, the experiences that you're getting. And you could put in there past life, karma, ancestral stuff. You could, all of that stuff. In fact, most of holistic healing is all geared towards helping you to awaken into this stage. Yeah, and that can be many, many different levels and many, many different kind of stages of waking up more and more and more and more into your truth, and what I mean by truth is your truth as an individual path. If you want to call it like a unique life flow. Okay, so at that level of awakening, it's almost like, in a sense, you're growing up, right? So when we're younger, we're told all of these paradigms we have to live within, which kind of makes sense, keeps us safe and helps us to orient ourselves. But then for many of us, we stay like that for all our lives. Now, if you're waking up into your own unique individual life flow, then what that means is you're growing up, right? You're becoming an adult, in a sense, in the truest sense of being an adult, realizing that you have the total self-authority to do that. Now, in this, I think most of the teachers, most of the spiritual teachers are operating at this level. Now, there is another level of awakening that happens. And again, so if you think about, most people are quite happy not waking up. And then there's a small percentage of us who have this yearning, this suffering, level of suffering that really does push us to wake up into our own unique life flow. And then for those of us who've woken up into our unique life flow, you might have another level, maybe suffering, maybe it's just a natural unfolding, but there's this feeling that there's more. And so for those of you at this level, you're starting to look at non-dual teachers. So teachers that are talking about oneness and talking about the fact that the ego or the personality, the person, is not real. This is all just an illusion. We're playing, we're acting a unique person on a unique life flow. And again, this is a very small percentage of those who actually wake up. So now when you start to look at these teachers, there's much fewer of them. And in that bracket, I would put like Adyashanti, Eckhart Tolle, Muji, Ramana Maharshi, these kinds of teachers, of which there's kind of like a handful of them, right? Now, these guys are talking about something completely different. When they're talking about awakening, they're talking about enlightenment. Now, enlightenment is not waking up into your unique path. It's waking up as the unique path. So there's no person trying to wake up. And at this level of awakening, the idea that you need to become a unique person, or you need to follow a certain flow, or you need to do a certain thing becomes completely irrelevant. It's not what you're looking at. So at this level of awakening, you don't wake up as a unique person on a unique life flow. You wake up as life flow. So the idea that life flow needs to follow any kind of law of attraction, or use crystals, or get healing of any sort, becomes a moot point. There's no person to improve. There's no person to become aligned with anything, because there's no person. So at this level of awakening, it's a whole different ball game. Like you're not even concerned with any of this adulting stuff. There's just all of that, because all of it is a dream. So when you awaken into this level, there's very few teachers to help guide you. There's very little community, and there's very little that makes sense at the lower levels. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because often when people talk about awakening, it's like, what level are they talking about? Because there's very, very different aspects of this. Like if I'm waking up to my uniqueness, if I'm waking up to my unique humanity, I'm waking up into an adult human, then in that sense of the word, all of these other tools that help me align more and more and more into my truth, like what are my belief systems? What am I thinking about? Where did it come from? Whose is it anyway? Do I really agree with that? All of these things are very relevant at that level where I'm waking up into more and more of trying to align with my life flow. But there's still me as a person. I still consider myself a person. I still think that I have a semblance of control and choice, how I'm moving, how I'm operating in my life, right? Now, if I'm talking about awakening into as life flow, then none of these tools are relevant at all. And often that can be quite confusing, because people are talking about waking up, but they're talking about waking up in a very different sense. So if you are at the point where you're like, actually, I know I'm not a person, or I'm looking for the deeper truth of how this entire thing operates. Like, what am I? What am I, without the thinking and without having to personalize things, without having to separate myself from my life flow. So I've got a life flow, and then I've got a me trying to live the life flow, duality. If you're at the point where you're like, no, I am starting to get glimpses that I'm actually not all of this thinking. And what am I without all the thinking? And what am I without all the contraction into a person? Once you release all of that, then all of this stuff, law of attraction, different levels of attainment, different guides, different this, different that all becomes completely irrelevant. That's all part of the, I don't want to say dream state, but it's all part of the process of thinking yourself as a person, as a human being. I don't really know if I'm explaining this very well, but essentially the purpose of this is to just start getting you thinking in terms of, okay, there are different levels when people talk about awakening, and they are quite distinct. So the first level of awakening, which is still incredibly freeing, incredibly important, really, to live a fulfilling life, is to wake up into the realization that all of these control mechanisms, all of these aspects of society telling you what kind of person you should be is not where it's at, right? It's just, that's just suffering. And once you start to wake up into that, and you start to become much freer in terms of what do I want as a person? What do I want, and what's my life going to look like? That there's a huge freedom to that. There's a huge level of freedom. There's a huge release. You can create a beautiful life for yourself going along that line. And then for some of us, we're going to keep moving through that, and then we're going to hit another level of awakening where we actually are yearning to release even that idea of an identity, of a person that's doing something. We want to fall in as life itself. Now, if you get to that, if you have a yearning for that, if that is something that is pulling you, then you do get to a phase where it all gets quite confusing, because there's so many spiritual teachers. And if you don't realize that these spiritual teachers are talking about the personality level in what they're doing, whether it's law of attraction, whether it's thinking yourself healthy, whether it's healing, like all the healing modalities are in that level, then you're pushing and pulling, because you're looking at the wrong level of awakening. So if you're getting into that level of awakening where you're trying to release all of the personality, then the movement is to release, let go, stop thinking you're authoring, stop thinking you're in control, stop thinking that, oh, I can do something. Like, you're not doing anything. And once you get to that, then you have to let go of all of these other modalities, tools, techniques, all of it. You have to let go of everything. And so for a lot of people, when they built a lot of attachment really to all of this stuff, that's the other letting go, right? And it's another major letting go, because then essentially you're letting go of any ideas or impulses to self-authorize anything, which can be really irritating, because you've spent all of your life trying to become this more unique person, and then you hit another thing, which is, right, let that go too. It's like, yeah, damn it, just wasted all my time, should just skipped. And some people do, right? Like, some people wake up from complete abject misery and being trapped, and they wake up and they skip that whole step of becoming a more unique person on a path. They actually realize they wake up into the path itself as the path itself. That does happen, but it doesn't happen to many of us. Most of us go through this process of waking up into our own uniqueness. And then the second awakening is realizing that we are actually the life flow itself. We're not a person experiencing it. We are simply the life flow itself. And so that doesn't follow any of the previous rules. It's a little bit like when you get to Newtonian physics and you drop into subatomic physics. It's that level of incompatibility with anything that you have known before. So at this level, if you are looking at this level, then you have to let go of any tool that is directing you to become a person. So anything that is encouraging you to strive, to manifest, to look at things in a way that you feel like you have choice. There's no choice at this level. Like, it's just irrelevant what the choices are. It's simply everything that is coming into your experience is the right thing to be coming into experience. There's no resistance, because there's no resistor. So there's no person to resist. And that can feel really difficult to get your head around. And I don't even think about it until you're at the point where you're experiencing it or starting to play with it, because it just makes no sense and it will just be very confusing. But it's just, I guess, just to know if you're feeling your trajectory is to wake up into a much deeper essence of self, then that all of these tools that you build along the way to make yourself more and more self-empowered, they also need to be let go at some point. So don't get too attached to them, I guess is what I'm saying. Don't get too attached to any of your tools, because you're going to have to drop all of them if that's your trajectory. And for many people, if you think most people are quite happy in following the rules, and then there's a small percentage of us that break free from that, and then there's a small percentage of those people that break free again. So yeah, there's not many. And if you look around the world, there's not very many enlightened beings walking around. You know, there's lots of people that think they've enlightened, but they've actually awoken. So they've awoken into themselves as a unique expression of life. That's what they've woken into, but they haven't woken up into life itself. That's a very different thing. And there's very few people like that walking around. So don't get confused when people are like, oh, so many people are waking up. They're not enlightening. That's a very different thing. But they've still got a personality and they still think they have control over anything. They're enlightened. They've only woken up into themselves as a person. Because before, what were they before? Before they were still a person, but they thought they were a person that had to follow certain rules. Okay. And then when you wake up as a person, you realize, hang on a minute, I am my own person. I can do whatever the hell I like. Different level of awakening. And then you wake up again and you think, shit, I'm not a person. I'm just life. Oopsie. Oh, Lordy. Okay, enough rambling. I have no idea whether that makes any sense, but maybe just food for thought, you know, and stick some comments in, questions, whatever, and then we'll just keep this conversation open and going. Thanks so much, guys. Enjoy.